So my name is Josiah Burke. I'm standing here outside Swinford Courthouse, and we've just been forcibly removed by the Gardaí from the inquest because we objected to the perjury of court. The perjury of court. We objected to this. We had objections to Sergeant Doherty and Detective Garda Declan Sweeney, who excluded key facts from their witness under oath yesterday. It was a whitewash. They gave an unfair and incomplete record of what was reported to them in Castlebar Garda Station. Sergeant Michael Doherty yesterday, Detective Garda Declan Sweeney, sat in that chair.
Yes.
They held up the Bible in Swinford Courthouse, and they gave a misleading account. They misled this court under oath. There are gravestones across this county from people who have died in that wicked hospital, and this place is stitching it up.
And the nurses and the doctors and the consultants leave this place running in different directions with their heads covered because they are lying openly. They are lying openly in this inquest, and the coroner is silent. This is not a true inquest. There is no establishing of the facts. There is no questioning by the coroner. It's a stitch up, it's a show trial, and it lacks any credibility. There is no credibility here. There is no credibility. If you ask any questions, you are removed by the guards.
And what did we report to Sergeant Michael Doherty and Garda Declan Sweeney? You might just explain that.
We reported our concerns after 5 hours approximately speaking with the Maaz family, where their daughter was taken into the hospital, and she was put from post to pillar from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. Then she was admitted to the hospital, and she was put into a COVID ward, a very vulnerable, high-risk patient, testing negative for COVID-19, sick from birth with a congenital heart disease, pulmonary atresia, being dealt with by a hospital in Dublin, Dr. Oslislock in Crumlin Hospital, taken and put into a COVID ward. The experts, the consultants, the doctors, the nurses,
people telling you to social distance,
put her into a COVID ward, where in her own words she called her parents and she said she was with the sick and the dying. Why have they done this to me? They gave her a pill which caused her to choke and to vomit and caused an allergic reaction. And she was put on palliative care without consulting the parents. This is what's happening at Mayo University Hospital. We reported a lot more to An Garda Síochána. They never said that it wasn't a criminal investigation. They should be moved from their jobs in the Garda Síochána.
Sweeney and Michael
They
Doherty.
never said it wasn't a criminal investigation. They said that's not a fair question when I asked them, because they knew full well it was criminal.
This is Declan Sweeney here, I believe, behind us. And what's the purpose of an inquest? Because we've obviously been thrown out of the inquest today, and there's a lot of talk about the family, and we understand the family is grieving their daughter, Sally Maaz. What is the purpose of the inquest, and what's the role of the coroner today in the court?
Well, the purpose of the inquest, one of the main purposes, is to establish the how, when, where and why of a death, to establish the facts and circumstances surrounding the death of the person involved. And it is in a measure, it's preventive that this will not happen again. It's not a trial, it's establishing the facts surrounding a death. And one of the main reasons is for the public interest that this will be prevented in the future. And the coroner is failing in his position in here. There are very few questions being asked. There's friendship, there's camaraderie, there's joking between the HSE, the guards, and the coroner.
Now the hospital, when you think about the inquest, it's to establish the facts, to establish the circumstances around a death. There are gross and serious conflicts in what happened. The family have told us clearly, and have told this court, that the hospital told them that Crumlin doctor Paul Oslislock that Crumlin Hospital approved the change in medication that we believe led to her death.
She was on it for 17 years.
She was on it for 17 years.
Yes.
And and he was her doctor for those 17 years. Now, the purpose of this inquest is to find out who's telling the truth. It's a very simple matter. Now, today, we have just been removed from the court because that witness, Paul Oslislock, that Crumlin doctor, has not been called to this court.
You might just remind people about the phone call that the family received from this doctor after Sally died.
Yes, so they received a phone call from this doctor, routine checkup, after Sally's death. And he was checking up to see, was she okay? He didn't even know she was in hospital. He didn't know she had died.
He was surprised.
And the hospital had told them that the hospital had approved the change in medication. Now, Pat O'Connor, coroner, is not interested in finding out the truth because he has refused to call that man as a witness, and he has allowed a report, a ramble of a report, a whitewash from the HSE to be read out on the record, which has no bearing on his decision as to what happened to Sally. So that is outrageous, it's an abomination, it's totally unacceptable, and the people who spoke up simply to highlight that have been dragged out of the court this morning. And it's sad. It's very sad.
The public deserve more than this.
Yes, they do.
The credibility of this inquest has been destroyed. There is no credibility in this inquest.
Sad.
Very, very serious what's happening. Swearing and telling untruths under oath in the sight of the Almighty God, and the coroner turning a blind eye. The coroner turning a blind eye.
And can you just explain what happened a few minutes ago? You, Josiah Burke, you spoke up at a juncture. Can you explain what happened at that point? What did the coroner say?
The whitewash of a report from Dr. Paul Oslislock had just finished being read out by Superintendent Garda Joe McKenna. Superintendent Joe McKenna, who, by the way, was also contacted 2 years ago in relation to this case and refused to have anything to do with what is manifestly a criminal matter.
Yeah.
Now, Joe McKenna read out that statement. The court was moving along in its merry way.
Yes.
I will say that Johan Verbruggen of Callantanzi stood up, and he, after viewing this abominable whitewash, this refusal to find out who's telling lies here, what's wrong, he got up and commended once again the court, and he commended he had a few nice words with the coroner, but how wonderful Dr. Paul Oslislock was.
I believe he's deceiving bereaved families. He's deceiving bereaved families. It's very, very sad what's happening.
Yes,
and no wonder when you have these people, these solicitors on Midwest, asking the public to go to them.
Yeah.
This is an absolute setup. Callantanzi on Midwest, calling upon the public, if you have any queries with the hospital, come to us. It's all a setup.
Yes.
Callantanzi solicitors, the coroner, the HSE, the guards, it's all wrapped up.
Yes.
It's all wrapped up.
And today, so Verbruggen from Callantanzi stood up and he smiled and he laughed about how wonderful the doctor was, and the coroner agreed, and he said, Paul Oslislock was just a wonderful man, and he had so many good features and all the rest. And then at that point, Martina stood up and said and protested this, and I also stood up, and
I believe that you asked, will this be taken as evidence?
I made the point that I asked clearly of the coroner. I said, will this report be taken as evidence? Will it be evidence for the court? Will it have a bearing on his decision? He refused to answer me. The guards approached immediately. Martina then stood up and protested this. And it was very quick, very swift, clearly prearranged. We were removed forcibly from the building. We were dragged out. There's papers all over the place. Some of our belongings are still in there. I believe your bag is still in there. And we were forcibly dragged out from the court, and one of the people
pulled through the ground.
Yes, my hands are bleeding from being pulled out.
My foot is hurting.
Yes.
I was dragged literally on the ground by a guard.
And just to be
no
clear,
arrest.
Yes,
no arrest because the guards do not want.
What did the guards? I recall the guards saying as we came out, we just have to do as we're told.
We just have to.
And it's quite a sad day. It's a sad day.
I spoke to the guard here yesterday, and I said you should should not be receiving orders from the coroner. It's not the duty of the Garda Síochána to receive orders and instructions from Coroner Pat O'Connor. And this is what is happening here. The coroner is telling the guards what to do, and they are doing it. And they're removing anybody who raises a question. And that is what happened here yesterday by these two Sergeant
Michael Doherty and Garda Declan Sweeney.
Declan Sweeney. They swore by oath and they gave misleading evidence. We were present in the room. We were present to put that right. We were the people who had come to the Garda station initially in May 2020. And never did they say that there was no criminality here. Never did they say. Because obviously I believe they know.
And just to clarify that our complaint was not that just patients were being put into COVID wards who were non-COVID. It was what was happening in the COVID ward. Can you just explain that really clearly for people?
So Sally Maaz was put into a COVID ward. She was separated from her family.
Yeah.
She was administered medication that led to an extremely adverse allergic reaction. She was vomiting. She was choking.
In the COVID
ward. In the COVID ward. Now, she was also withdrawn from her medication that she had been on since she was a child. 17 years of this medication.
And
the
when she
hospital
called,
made a decision to remove her this medication from her, to withdraw her from this medication. Now, after she was given this other medication that gave her a reaction, she called her family in distress.
Well, but first thing she did was she called for a nurse to come, and no nurses were available. And that was why was that concerning for patients in the COVID ward?
Well, that's very concerning because obviously patients are left there sick, dying, vomiting, puking, as she said herself to her family. In her father's words, she said, "I thought I was going to die." And she was calling nurses and no nurse was coming. And this is what has been happening at Mayo University Hospital for the last 2 years.
And that's why we went to the Gardaí. It was what was happening inside the ward.
Yeah, this is why we went to the Gardaí.
That patients were being neglected. They were being given obviously wrong medication and put on palliative care and midazolam and fentanyl, like we heard yesterday. And we heard twice that Sally Maaz, she tried to call for help and nobody came. We heard that instance when she was given the wrong medication, and secondly, towards the end of her life, and her parents queried, why is your nose not cleaned? And she said, well, I called, I couldn't see any nurses on the ward, so there were no nurses in the COVID ward.
The reason we're here today, the reason this is so
the nurses have abandoned the ward.
Yes.
We heard that report some months ago from Maria Lyons, a nurse who did give a statement.
Marie Lyons
didn't come in herself. Marie Lyons, yes. And she did give a report to a local paper, and she spoke in her own words of them being thrown up there to the COVID ward, the elderly, the sick, the vulnerable, the dying, and in her own words, we didn't know whether they were dead or alive.
She said we didn't know what came of them.
We didn't know what came of them. And that is the treatment. That is the treatment the sick, the elderly and the dying are receiving at MUH. Yes, we did feel it was criminal, and we still believe it's criminal what's happening there. We did ask the guards to investigate, but they never said that it wasn't. They never said it wasn't.
They couldn't say. They were asked.
And I did ask the guard that night, would you like that to happen to your daughter? And he said no. He said no. And when I asked him, do you think this is a criminal investigation is necessary? He said, that's not a fair question, Martina. That was his own words.
And that was Sergeant Michael Doherty.
That was Sergeant Michael Doherty said that's not a fair question.
And what did he say
Martina.
yesterday?
Yesterday
what did he say yesterday?
Declan Sweeney said that they said that there would be no criminal investigation.
He said he came into the room and made it clear to us that there would be no criminal investigation,
which is
not what happened at all. We followed up for weeks afterwards with counsellors, TDs, the superintendent. We tried to get clarity on whether or not an investigation would happen, and we were never told yes or no.
But yesterday, Detective Declan Sweeney said he came into us and he told us there would be no criminal investigation, and this is simply not true. This is not true, so it's misleading evidence accepted by Coroner Pat O'Connor.
It's important to say that this court is refusing to hear the truth. Now, we were dragged out today. We were not arrested. The Gardaí dragged us out, threw us out the door and locked it. They didn't arrest us. They can't arrest us.
So this
They
is-
just
yes,
need
yes.
to remove the truth from
Yeah.
the courtroom.
This is an
It's very
inquest
sad.
behind locked doors.
It's an
now.
inquest behind
Yeah.
locked doors. What they've done today is they have removed the truth from the courtroom.
It's a
They have
sanitised
their
inquest.
stitch up. They have their fake reports that are not being read into the evidence. They're going to have their media release later on to pretend that some kind of justice was done. It's sad, it's tragic, it's an abomination. And that's why we're here today, to let you know what's going on in here today, that it's not justice, it's not the truth. There's no interest in finding the truth. We're sad to say that the coroner and the solicitors are working together. We've seen it multiple times already.
Yes, 100%.
They're working together.
And they have been all along.
At every juncture where something serious came up,
every time,
Johan
yes.
Verbruggen of Callantanzi, he was apologetic, he was moving on. The coroner would say, just get on with it. That's what he said, get on with it. And he moves on, he nods to the family, he's done his job, he said it, but he didn't say it because there's no justice, there's no following through to find out who told the truth and who didn't.
And what's the significance? So this is a COVID inquest today, and what's the significance of today, given the past 2 years?
Well,
Well, this is very, very serious because the way Sally Maaz was treated and the circumstances and events leading up to her death, and we believe causing her death, and then to put out that it was a COVID-19 death, this would have happened to lots and lots of other people as well. And that is why there is extreme precaution taken here that the truth does not get out. Their evidence is conflicting, their evidence is
obfuscating,
conflicting
they're
each other, and yet the coroner is silent. One yesterday, the doctor said that
Professor
the nurses,
O'Malley.
Professor O'Malley said that the nurses decide who goes into the COVID ward. When the nurse gets up, she says, no, the doctors decide, and the coroner is silent. He's not asking questions, he's not seeking to establish the facts. And yes, I am saying that today, Coroner Pat O'Connor is failing in his duty as a coroner here in this
And maybe
inquest.
remind people as well, like what has happened in these COVID wards. We know that we've had a lot of contact with families. Tell us a little bit about what happens, the ventilation without the family's permission. We know about the man in the nursing home in Kilbrew, brought out with maggots in his face behind closed doors. What has been going on in these COVID wards and
Well,
these nursing homes?
ultimately, there's a total denial of transparency. There's no visiting, there's no truth being told. You can't find out. The constant theme from the families, the many families we've dealt with, is that no information can be received. No transparency. You pick up the phone, no one answers, they don't tell you what's happening. Now, we know from Sally what happened, we know from many others what happened. Essentially, they're being killed inside those wards. Because if you take somebody off their medication they've been on for 17 years, if you administer a drug that causes a severe adverse medical allergic reaction, and that person dies, I don't know what that is if it's not killing. And I say that advisedly, and I say it with a sad heart, that we live in a country where that can happen and around the world, but it's sadly the truth. And that has happened again and again and again. Now, since we came out about Sally Maaz, we have dealt with many families. And you know, there are gravestones right across this county from people who have died in that hospital. And their stories have been aired in part on the local media. We've been hearing it over and over again about people who died in horrific, tragic, third world circumstances, no answers, no truth.
Denied food
and the
and
sad
water,
thing is
given
that the avenue
sedation.
you have to get the truth is this building. This is what it's for. An inquest. That you can go to the inquest and you can find out what happened, because the hospital won't tell you. We know that. So Pat O'Connor is going to tell you what happened. And sadly today, it's not happening. We've been dragged out. The truth is being obscured. And I suppose this is so important because, you know, I don't blame people in a way for not going to try and seek justice. No wonder there's a cover-up. No wonder there's despair and suicide and depression across the country. No wonder there's spiraling mental health problems. No wonder families are distraught and dismayed and totally hopeless, because the only avenue you have is stitched up. And that's the truth today, and we hope this message gets out loud and clear, that if nothing else, this inquest and this coroner and this bunch of solicitors, Callantanzi, are stitching up, they're working together, and the truth is being obscured. And there's a lot to be hid. There's a lot to be hid. You know, we've talked now for 2 years about COVID, about the things that have been happening, about the public health restrictions, about the denial of every kind of freedom, about the transformation of society. And today there's not an ounce of transparency. It's cover up, cover up, cover up. So when you're at home today and you're watching this, know that when your politicians are silent, know that when the HSE are stitched up and won't answer a single question, know that when Michael Kilcoyne sits on the HSE Forum West and won't ask why the staff are gagged, know it today from Swinford Courthouse here in County Mayo that the two people who wanted the truth and who spoke up simply to highlight it are the three people who are dragged out and locked, and the doors are locked and the inquest is hid.
So
and it's very sad.
As he said, the doors are locked here now, and we are locked out. There's no transparency.
It's very sad.
The coroner is not doing his duty. They're all in this together. As we said before, the coroner, the guards, the HSE, the doctors, consultants, they have nothing to fear. They can tell one lie after another, and it's all covered up. And we are dragged through the floor, dragged out, our bags and our papers all over the place by the guards, because of course we refuse to leave. We are the public. We have a right to be at this inquest. This is our country. This is our people. We have a right to be here. We have a right to know the truth, that the truth would be established around any suspicious death. And Sally Maaz was a suspicious death. And we need the facts to be established and the truth to be established. Now, strangely enough, 3, 4, 5 guard the cars, guard the vans, no arrest. Because the guards, the coroner and the hospital do not want this to be known. They do not want the public to know this. And it's very even difficult to get the local papers and the media to publicise this. So that is why we are putting this out there. We have our own jobs, we have our employment. I'm a teacher for the last 35 years. My son has a job, my daughter, we're all in full-time employment. But this is why we're doing this. We can't do anything else. It's up to you now, for the sake of your loved ones, to stand up and say no more of this Mayo University Hospital, no more of this Pat O'Connor, no more of these show trials where the truth is not even asked for. And it's sewn up, he knows the result before the inquest begins. And this is what's happening there. It's all in agreement, and we've sat here week after week. This has been going on for 2 years. And we've seen the joking and the laughing, and it's absolutely disrespectful towards any family that are bereaved. There's no seeking after truth. We've done our part, we can't do anything else.